The Russian president said that he led the aborted mutiny on as long as it did to avoid bloodshed, while Wagner boss said that he never intended to overthrow the government. Putin's televised address was his first public comment since Saturday, when he had said that the rebellion threatened Russia's very existence and those behind it would be punished. Meanwhile, the United States envoy in Moscow reached out to Russian officials. U.S. intelligence officials were able to gather an extremely detailed and accurate picture of Prigozhin's plans leading up to his short-lived rebellion. CNN says that U.S. had information regarding where and how Wagner was planning to advance. So what's next for Wagner fighters? Let's analyze this with key developments. Hitting out, Putin accused Ukraine and its Western allies of wanting Russians to kill each other during mutiny by mercenaries of the Wagner group. The president said that Russia's enemies were gunning for fratricide. He said that from the start of the Saturday's event, steps were taken on his orders to prevent large-scale bloodshed. Putin stated that it was his decision to grant amnesty to Wagner fighters and the chief whose mutiny served up the greatest challenge yet to his two-decade rule. The president also thanked Russian civilians for their patriotism and praised security officials for their work. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Civilian solidarity showed that any blackmail, any attempts to organize internal turmoil is doomed to fail." Now, what's next for Wagner fighters? Well, Putin tabled three options: join the Russian army, leave for Belarus, or go back home. Yevgeny Prigozhin says that Wagner did not want to overthrow the Russian government in the first place. In his first public comments since ending the mutiny, Wagner boss said that the mercenary group does not regret strikes on Russian aircraft. Prigozhin added that the March of Justice, as he calls it, highlighted security problems throughout Russia. He said, and I'm quoting here, "We blocked all military units and airfields that were in our path." The Wagner headquarters in St. Petersburg said it remained open for business. The Russian foreign minister stated that Moscow is checking if Western agencies were involved in the Wagner mutiny. Sergei Lavrov said that the firm would continue to operate in Mali and the Central African Republic. In Washington, National Security Council spokesperson has said that officials were monitoring the turmoil in the nuclear-armed nation of Russia. John Kirby stated that the rebellion is Russia's internal affair. He added that Washington is not and will not be involved in any way. The U.S. talked with Russia over security during the Wagner mutiny. The State Department said that U.S. ambassador in Moscow contacted Russian officials to reiterate the no Washington involvement message. Now, for more on this, we were earlier joined by Edward P. Joseph from Washington, D.C. He's a renowned foreign policy analyst from Johns Hopkins University.
It's a good question. It's fair to ask that. And of course, there can always be some type of orchestrated angle here. But for the moment, it doesn't really appear that that's the case. It appears more likely that this was an actual confrontation. Because why is that the case? Because both of these individuals, Prigozhin and Putin, have suffered serious costs and blows to this. And forcing Vladimir Putin to come on television now and try to pretend that everything is under control. That's not what you want in the middle of a war, is to have to project that and say, gee, there's actually nothing to see here. So it's more likely that the use of Belarus and the Lukashenko position is a way for them to attempt to save face. But what they cannot do here, this is very important, what they cannot do is take away the words and the actions that that took place there over the weekend. Prigozhin, this is one of the key things here that no one should forget. Prigozhin not only challenged the competence, which he has long done, of the military establishment, Putin's own defense minister, General Defense Minister Shoigu, not only challenging that, but challenging the premise for the war. This is something that Prigozhin and Putin neither can walk that back. Prigozhin suggested that the basis for the war was not some elaborate Nazi regime in Ukraine that somehow was going to pave the way for some assault on Russia, that Russia had no choice. To the contrary, Prigozhin suggested that it was a war of choice and a mistaken one done for reasons that had nothing to do with Russian security. And neither of them can walk that back. Please. Desperation, of course. There's no other word really to describe it, but that Vladimir Putin desperately trying to concoct an excuse to cover for this terribly embarrassing, even troubling events over the weekend where a former close ally, Yevgeny Prigozhin, mounted what Vladimir Putin himself called a mutiny. And for him now, for Vladimir Putin to say, well, this was somehow concocted by the West, is actually another form of criticism of Prigozhin. It says, if this is the case, if that were actually the case, that Prigozhin's attempt was inspired by the West, well, then that means it's even worse than a mutiny. It means that Vladimir Putin hasn't really backed down on his criticism. But of course, we know that it was not some type of Western attempt, but this was actually an example of the open disarray and chaos within the Russian security sector that has performed so badly, and in which Prigozhin has emerged as one of the sharpest critics of the incompetence of the military establishment, even though his own forces, the Wagner group, did not distinguish themselves in Ukraine. So the essence here is that both Putin and Prigozhin emerged from this confrontation both looking weak, and Russia looking very weak and in disarray.
Now, at this moment, we can confirm that a plane associated with Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has landed in Belarus. According to reports, the plane is a Russian-registered Embraer Legacy 600 jet. Russia has also announced that it is dropping the case of armed mutiny against the Wagner mercenary group and specifically the chief. Flight Radar 24 says that the business jet flew to Belarus early on Tuesday. Reports suggest that the identification codes of the aircraft matched those of a jet linked by the United States to Autolegs Transport, which is linked to Prigozhin by the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control. Now, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that Wagner chief Prigozhin will be moving to Belarus as part of a deal to diffuse tensions. Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin and all of his fighters vacated Russia's military headquarters in the southern city of Rostov-on-Don on Sunday. The Wagner fighters had captured the city of Rostov hundreds of miles to the south before racing north in their convoy, transporting tanks and armored trucks and smashing through barricades set up to stop them. Prigozhin had escalated his direct challenge to the Kremlin and pledged to oust the leadership of the defense ministry in Moscow over what he says is their disastrous leadership during the war in Ukraine.